So if you want the best Hearthstone decks for the Stormwind expansion, you've come to the right place. Basically, I'm going to go over the 7 best decks and talk about why they're great, and then give you a couple of bonus ones at the end. And I'm going to try to give you one from every single class that's at least relevant right now, so you guys can have a wide variety of things to try out. The first one is Face Hunter. And the reason why it's on here is because Face Hunter is actually the best deck in the game in top 1000 Legend, which almost never happens, by the way, Legend throughout, and also just Diamond in general. It's an absolute pub stomp right now, and this build runs a tech card, the Cult Neophyte, which counters Mages, which is one of the most popular decks in the game right now, and overall it just wins everything. It's the deck I used to get to Legend, and win a quick 7-1 with it because people were like, why aren't you Legend yet? So I said, fine, I'll play Face Hunter, and just steamrolled through everything. Yeah, I would highly recommend this deck. It's not super expensive, and it's great for climbing. So the next best deck on this list is Handbuff Paladin, and that's on the list for a couple of reasons. One, it's just the next best deck statistically. It's the 3rd best in top 1000 Legend, in normal Legend it's the 2nd best, and in Diamond it is by far the 2nd best, with a pretty wide gap between the 3rd best and the 2nd best. So overall, it's a very solid deck statistically. But then you take into consideration the triangle of rock, paper, scissors that is Hearthstone. You will have control beats aggro, aggro beats combo, combo beats control. Right now, combo is king, obviously, with all the quests, so control is irrelevant. That means aggro decks have no counter, and they currently counter the most popular decks in the game right now. Put that together, and decks like Face Hunter, Handbuff Paladin, Aggro and Elemental Shaman, and even Zoolock, to some extent, all do really well in the meta right now, and generally speaking, they're a little bit less expensive. This one doesn't really fit that bill, because you have a lot of legendaries, Cornelius, High Lord, Varian, and McGurgle. But you could probably cut them and run a couple of extra 1-drop spells or minions like the Argent Squire, for example, for Divine Shield synergy, along with the Jewel Kit. So there are things that you can do to make it a little bit better. But overall, I would say that this deck is extremely solid. I would try it out if you haven't already, and let's jump into the next one. The next best deck on this list is Aggro Elemental Shaman, and it's basically on there for the exact same reason as Face Hunter and Handbuff Paladin. Aggro, burn, kill them before they finish their quest. This one actually is really cheap, along with Face Hunter to some extent, where it has no legendaries. Face Hunter has, I think, 2, and the most expensive one from this list so far has been Handbuff Paladin, so if you're tight on a budget, I would say go for Aggro Shaman or Face Hunter. But man, this deck just does the job. It is able to get early pressure on the board with a couple of good 1-drops, curve out into a decent 2-drop that draws you cards, or a reduced cost 3-drop that you're just able to play. Then you have some of the best mid-game in the entire game, with the most 3-drop pools ever, and it's just so strong. Every single one of these cards is phenomenal. Into the late game, you finish them off with Doomhammer and Rockbiter Weapon, or Doomhammer Stormstrike, and if you need a couple more minions on the board, you can just play the Fire Elemental and Torrent to control the board a little bit more. It's got everything you could possibly need on a budget. Would highly recommend. Let's jump into the next one. The next best deck on this list is actually Quest Mage, which I think is a very strong, albeit uninteractive deck. Basically, the whole goal of this is to finish your quest and play your guy that gives you 3 spell damage permanently, and then finish off your opponent with Fireballs, Pegasus Blast, and Ignites and Ruined Orbs, all of which have been reduced in cost by your Incanter's Flows. Basically, the idea is play the quest, try to draw as many cards as possible as well to just keep your hand full of spells. That way, when you finish your quest, you can just burn them down the following turn. And basically that means for the mulligan, all you gotta do is look for frost spells because they're the spells you have the least of, as well as just look for Incanter's Flow and draw. The last thing about this deck is it is actually incredibly cheap, only needing the quest itself. Other than that, no other legendaries, so if you're on a budget, this is a deck for you. I'm going to be honest, next best deck for me is Quest Warlock, and some people run Zoolock, and there is a version of this, and I will actually have this in an honorable mentions, but I like the Control Quest Warlock more, because the more I play this game, the more I see there being board-based matchups. I'm seeing more Paladins, I'm seeing more Shamans, and I'm even seeing more Warlocks, and having a deck in here that has more healing with Bloodshard Bristleback, the Flight Master, along with Spice Bread Bakers, I just think does more for the deck, considering where the matchups are going. And you still do enough damage to yourself to usually get to your quest around the same time as Mage, maybe 1 or 2 turns later. But since you don't play that many minions, a lot of the time the Mage doesn't have anything to use their free spells on. If you remember, their frost spells, if you look at the quest, Flurry needs a minion target, Brain Freeze needs a minion target, so half of their spells won't even be able to be used against you. So even against one of your worst matchups, in my opinion, you're still fine. You got a ton of healing, and I think that this deck, if played well, has the potential to be amazing. And the last thing is it's not even that expensive. Flightmaster Dunger you get for free, Cornelius Roam you could replace with anything else in Warlock. You have a ton of draw options, and that leaves you with Tamsin and the Quest, which are kind of irreplaceable, but overall, very solid deck. I love it a ton. Let's jump into the next one. So the next deck on this list is Death Rattle Demon Hunter, and this deck is actually good for a couple of reasons. One, you have a couple of cards to counter combo decks. Cult Neophyte, Far Watch Post, just to keep your opponent at bay, along with the Illidari Studies, which can sometimes get you Glide, which can be very good into certain matchups. But then, you also have cards like the Rustrot Viper, which allows you to kill weapons. You have good draw. You have a little bit of board wipe with the Fell Rattler and a ton of rush minions, but you also have the potential to do damage with cards like the Fellsteel Executioner, getting corrupted, hitting him in the face, curving into an Illidari Inquisitor. And arguably one of the best 7-drops in the game with Death Speaker Blackthorn. Overall, this deck is just strong at every stage of the game, and although it doesn't like majorly excel at any one thing, it's just a tempo deck that gets a ton of value, has good draw, and will get the job done. I think that it's arguably a top 7, top 10 deck without a problem, maybe even top 5 depending on what the matchups are at the time, so I'd recommend trying it out. It's relatively cheap, you only need one legendary, and that is Death Speaker Blackthorn, and other than that, I just highly recommend the deck. So the next deck on this list is Anacondra Druid, and trust me, I wanted it to be Quest Druid so bad, but at the end of the day, I think Anacondra Druid is just better. You have good ramp, and then once you get to Lady Anacondra, into Solar Eclipse Double Germination on Lady Anacondra, you basically just play whatever you want for the entire rest of the turn, flood the board, finish it up with maybe an Arbor Up or a Soul of the Forest to make sure your board's a little bit stickier, and then you kill him the next turn. I've got to say, overall, this deck has been extremely good in the past. This deck has changed basically nothing and is still top tier according to Hearthstone Replay, and from what I've seen, is very strong still. And as long as you don't go against like a hard aggro deck that just runs you down, because again, this is a combo deck, it does have its fair share of weaknesses against aggro. As long as you don't get rushed down too fast, you'll probably win. And if you do get a little bit close to dying, you can always Cenarian Ward for some extra HP or armor, I guess. And yeah, I would recommend this deck. It's also cheap. You only really need Lady Anacondra for it, so try it out if you have the dust. The next deck on this list is Quest Zoolock, and this is when I'm getting into the honorable mentions category. And the reason why I like this deck so much is because it basically takes what I liked about the Quest, but also gives you a board presence. So if you want to play more aggressively and you're playing against a lot of, like, say, Paladins, you can put out giant Flesh Giants to contest the board, so that way you don't get blown out right away. I actually think that this deck is pretty solid, arguably better than the normal questline control Zoolock, but that is up in the air. It's not set in stone or anything, so it's up for you guys to decide, but I've decided to put it on this list because I really liked it. So yeah, go ahead, try it out if you haven't already. I would love to see what you guys think about it, and it's cheap. Again, all you need is this one legendary, and that's what I like about this meta so far. Most of the decks only require 1 to 3 legendaries, so it's pretty good for budget players because everything revolves around this one key component, the quest, and everything else can be optimized around it, which is pretty cool. So the next deck on this list is Bleed Miracle Rogue, and you could say that Quest Rogue is better, but I just don't think Rogue's in a good spot in general right now. But the reason why I like Bleed Rogue is just because I think it's the most entertaining deck to play right now. It requires a lot of skill, you need to draw cards extremely quickly, as well as set up your combo, which, if done 100% optimally, I feel like you can do it by turn 5, maybe 6, depending on what your hand looks like. But yeah, you basically can combo off with a good hand against most decks really easily. And if you get to your combo, you will get to your combo before a quest deck gets to their combo, because they have to finish the quest, then play a 5-drop, and then kill you, which they're not always going to be able to do. But this deck can just go crazy, basically play the Garrett with Gadgetzan Auctioneer out, after reducing the cost of everything in your hand with Efficient Octobots, playing a ton of coins from your Loan Sharks, drawing through your entire deck, and just drawing all of your Garretts while giving your Auctioneer spell damage with the Ethereal Aug Merchant. And then you can do up to 66 damage, I think, in total, which is pretty sick. And yeah, it's just a good old time. I would highly recommend this deck if you want a deck that, like, stimulates you And it also has no legendaries, so it's not that hard to just pick up and play. It's not going to win you as many games as, say, Quest Rogue. I just personally like this one more because it's more fun. Now we have Shadow Priest, and I think this is going to be my last deck. I don't really think there are any other decks out there that I want to showcase, but I wanted to showcase Shadow Priest because I think it deserves a little bit of a spotlight. And this is not a refined list at all. I think there's a more refined list actually on Hearthstone top deck, so you should probably go check that out. But just in general, I think Shadow Priest is not as bad as people think that it is. I think that it's still bad. Don't get me wrong. It's awful. But even in just one day, or 2 days, Priest's win rate has gone up by more than any other class except I think Paladin in those couple of days, where it's gone from about 36 to I think at the lowest like 35.8% win rate, all the way up to 41.9. That's a 3% increase, which is pretty substantial as people learn how to play the deck and optimize Priest a little bit. I don't necessarily think it'll be top tier, but I do think it might edge out and rise up above some of these other classes. And as usual, Priest will probably do better in the highest ranks of play, just because it's a fairly high skill cap class with a lot of randomness. So keep your eye out for it. Don't be surprised if this deck slowly rises into the meta. Maybe not top tier, but still playable. And overall, I think that is going to be it for today. I'm just quickly looking over the list of decks that I have, and nothing really stands out that I missed. The only thing would be Elemental Shaman, but that's very similar to the Aggro Shaman that I played, except with a couple of different cards and not Doomhammer as the main win condition. But yeah, that's about it. You could also play, just showcasing a couple more before taking too long. Quest Druid is very good. Quest Rogue has some potential. Quest Hunter has had some potential. Basically, most of the quests seem to be at least okay, except for, I guess, kind of the Demon Hunter one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.